How did Haskell Garrett, Jeremy Ruckert, and Tyreke Smith look during day one of Senior Bowl practice? Here to answer that question and a whole lot more, it's Ross Jackson from Locked On Saints. He is down in Mobile, Alabama for Senior Bowl practice. He'll let us know what he saw during day one and project what we may see from these three Buckeyes during the Senior Bowl practices and during the game on Saturday. You'll hear all about that right here on Locked On Buckeyes.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Buckeyes, part of Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Wednesday, February 2nd in the year 2022, and I want to thank every person out there for making Locked On Buckeyes your first listen of every single day. The podcast is free and available on all platforms. The Senior Bowl week is a major, huge interview for every athlete involved. For Ohio State, there are three individuals that are down there right now in Mobile, Alabama: Haskell Garrett, Tyreke Smith, and Jeremy Ruckert. One day of practice is complete. There's a practice today, there's a practice on Thursday, and a game on Saturday. Here with us to let us know all about what happened on day one and project looked into the future is Ross Jackson from Locked On Saints. He is no stranger to the podcast, and I'm sure you will love everything Ross brings to this show. Ross is a great examiner and analyzer of the football, and I'm sure you'll realize that as soon as he starts talking about your favorite Buckeye. And joining us now here on Locked On Buckeyes, those of you on YouTube see the crossover on the background. That's because our guy, Ross Jackson from Locked On Saints, is back, but he's not talking about the New Orleans Saints, maybe a future New Orleans Saint. He's down at the Senior Bowl, and he's our eyes and ears this week down at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama, looking at Haskell Garrett, Jeremy Ruckert, and Tyreke Smith. Ross Jackson, welcome back to Locked On Buckeyes.
Hey, buddy, man, I'm glad to be here with you, man. We're trying to do the most out here, make sure we're getting a look at all these guys. But I always have a little bit of an eye toward the Buckeyes. You know what I'm saying? I'm always gonna be watching these dudes, so I'm glid to be here with you, man.
I know you wish that your guy Chris Olave would have accepted that Senior Bowl invite. He did not. He's not down there. I know you have a love for Olave, and you hope that the Saints pick him up in the draft.
Yes, absolutely, man. He's the guy that I think coming out of Ohio State that I would just love to see end up in black and gold, little fleur-de-lis on the side of the helmet. Would love to see him running routes in New Orleans with whoever it is that's going to be throwing the ball there next year. I have no idea, but no, he's not out here right now. But hopefully, it all still works out.
Could you imagine Olave and Michael Thomas coming back to the team? I mean, that would be amazing to have two Buckeyes on the outside that you just can't guard.
Yeah, those two in particular, man, especially the way that they complement one another. I mean, the Saints have been in the market for a guy like Chris Olave since they lost Brandon Cooks, right? Like since they had that other dynamic weapon when Brandon Cooks was a little bit worried about his target share and things like that. You get a guy with the talent of Chris Olave who could do so much more than just stretch the field. He ain't never going to be worried about his target share. And so he and Michael Thomas would have a lot cooking for sure.
That is true. What has the scene been like down there in Mobile for the Senior Bowl? And what have you seen from just all the players so far?
Oh, it's been awesome, man. Like we were here last year, but of course last year was such an adjusted sort of situation, everything with, health and safety protocols being in place and all of that. Now things are a little bit, we understand a lot more, we know a lot more, and folks are kind of, we've all agreed to take care of one another and everything. And so like things are going really well, and it's been awesome. I mean, you're seeing people that you haven't seen for a while, and all of that amongst all the media and everything. But when it comes to these players, this is a real opportunity for them. And you see that the talent at the Senior Bowl gets better and better every single year. You're getting multiple first-round picks. You're getting first-round quarterbacks, all of that. And so I think that when you look at the way that the Senior Bowl is trending and you start to understand the value for these players, it goes beyond just what happens on the field. It's meeting with the with each individual club. Like every one of these players will meet with all 32 NFL teams. The HBCU Combine was here earlier in the weekend. We saw that they met with all 32 teams, as well as with like the USFL. It's upcoming.
Oh, wow.
The XFL was there. The Canadian Football League was there. I saw some CFL representatives there today too. So there's just so many other opportunities out there for these players. And so it's just a lot of excitement, man. It's just a lot of excitement.
This is what I call a crazy, wild, week-long interview. I mean, I've never had a
Yeah.
job where a job interview is not just a week long, but also the past 3, 4, sometimes 5 years for these guys. These coaches, executives, they're going back to your first day at practice. Like, what
Right.
was he like when he walked onto campus? Maybe even
Right.
go back to high school because they want to know all the details about you. And for Haskell Garrett, Jeremy Ruckert, and Tyreke Smith, these three gentlemen, they need this week. They need these practices to raise their draft stock and to really show all of these coaches that these guys need to be and they should be or they want to be future pros.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the place to get it done. This is the place to do it. I mean, before these guys even hit the field, we were already hearing about, oh, this player has that swag, has that it factor, like all these other things, just because they've been walking through the hallways and interviewing and talking with people and all of that. And so you just get a greater understanding, though, when you get to see them out on the field and all the different ways they can go through. All three of these Ohio State Buckeyes that have been out here, I think, each of them still has something left to show. Each of them has shown a little something, some more than others, but I think you're absolutely right. This is a huge benefit for these guys to be able to come out and participate in front of all 32 NFL teams, all the folks that are going to be writing about them, and then working with NFL coaching staffs as well. Even though it's not the head coaches that are calling these plays and you're seeing some of the coordinators take some of those responsibilities, you're still getting a lot of opportunity there to just learn what it's like to work under the supervision of NFL coaches that expect something different from you, right? The Detroit Lions team that is there, that's covering a couple of there's a couple of Buckeyes on that team, and I think that when it comes to the way that they wrapped up practice this last time, they picked two people to go one-on-one, a defensive end and an offensive lineman, to go one-on-one with one another, and the losing side, offense or defense, had to do however many push-ups. The rest of them got to run away. Defense lost. Offense got to waltz off, all of that. But, you just love to see that kind of intensity, the things that they bring that are probably a lot different than the conditions under which they practice in college.
We're here with Ross Jackson from Locked On Saints. He's our eyes and ears down at the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. Ross, I want to open this up to you. There's three Buckeyes there. Which Buckeye has wowed you the most after day one of practice?
Let's start with the one that has wowed me more consistently so far, because one of them had a big wow play that I definitely want to highlight. But the guy that has wowed me most consistently is Ohio State Buckeye and tight end Jeremy Ruckert. He's the one that I like a ton. Brandon Olson over at Locked On Gators is a lot of talking about split zone action, and that is something that Ohio State fans should know very, very well. These tight ends crossing behind the formation to get the blocks over on the back end, or even lead block as they come through, depending upon the play call and the play flow of the running back. And he does a phenomenal job in that area of the game, not only actually executing the blocks and leading the way, super physical guy, but also able to get loose and also be a threat in the flats for that too, for a rolling quarterback. So you see that with a lot of mobile quarterbacks. The Saints do that a ton when Taysom Hill is under center. They use that that crossing, that split zone action by the tight end to free that tight end up in the flat to the direction that Taysom Hill is rolling out to. So you see that there. You see it in Chicago with Justin Fields. You've seen it several places with those mobile quarterbacks. So it's a really big time staple. My assessment around Jeremy Ruckert in terms of what you expect to see from him is that he's somebody that can have a long career in the NFL, being that type of guy that can block and that can catch. He can run the seam. He can do so much. And so you like his versatility, and he's already starting to show that out here with a kind of fingertip catch at one point that he had out here on the field as well.
I think a 6'5", 250-pound frame. I think that was his official measurement at the Senior Bowl on Monday. I think that's an asset that can be utilized in a different way than it was at Ohio State. At Ohio State, he was primarily a blocker. We were looking to get more catches from him this past season. Didn't happen. Of course, he got Jackson Smith and Jigba going off of the ways that he did. I mean, it's self-explanatory.
A lot of receivers to feed over there.
So many receivers to feed. But I think Ruckert is one of those guys that this week can raise his draft stock more as a pass catching tight end. We know he can block. We've seen what he has done in the blocking over the past 3 to 4 years. But I think his pass catching ability is one of those weapons that nobody's really tapped into in college. And a coach might say, hey, you have something that's not been utilized properly. Let's tap into that skill set once you're in the National Football League.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're going to see that immediately once he makes it up to the next level. And you're already starting to see that here, too. I mean, he gets the opportunity to run a lot of routes here in Mobile, and he gets the opportunity to go one-on-one with linebackers and go one-on-one with safeties and run 7-on-7s to where they're not worried about what you can do as a blocker. They want to see you run routes. He gets a lot of opportunities to showcase that over and over and over again. And even better to just, in terms of what you were discussing, in terms of a coach seeing it, identifying it, and wanting to work on it. It's why the practice week is so important, because you'll see them revisit the same concepts over and over again, trying to see if you can progress. You don't even have to be perfect by the end of the week, right?
Yeah.
You get the playbook on Tuesday and then you're trying to have a game on Saturday. It's never going to be pretty. But when you look at what it is that they're trying to find, it's can you end up continuing to take notes? Can you take the note and can you make it into an improvement? And I think you'll see that from Jeremy Ruckert as he gets more and more opportunities in the passing game.
Did he have any struggles after day one of practice?
Yeah, I would say that a couple of little things that he had that were just, when they had him line up in line, they worked with the tight ends a lot at a true Y as opposed to putting him out in the slot or getting him out a little bit out wide, which we certainly saw a little bit of throughout. So I think you just want to see him be able to be more consistent in that versatility from point to point, right? Not having to adjust as much, not having, being able to take that step to the outside and be able to produce there immediately as opposed to sort of, having a little bit of a stutter every time that he moved to another place. So it's just that comfort level. And this is what happens at the Senior Bowl, right? You're working with a quarterback you've never communicated before. You're working with an offensive line that you've never communicated with before and all of that. And so there's certainly complications that come with all that. So you just want to see him settle into those nerves a little bit as the week goes on.
Is he somebody that the Saints might go after? I know they took, I believe, the kid from Dayton last year.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I haven't really followed the Saints that much this past season. But is Ruckert a guy that maybe they go back-to-back years drafting a tight end in the NFL draft?
If he can show the pass catching part, absolutely, that would be a team that would be interested in him, because right now they don't have the full answer at the tight end position. Now they have another Ohio State Buckeye there and Nick Van Ette that I do think will be there next year. We talked about, at the beginning of the season, you and I, about whether or not he would play out his entire 3-year contract.
Right.
I'm pretty confident that he'll be back in 2022 because Adam Troutman hasn't fully panned out yet, and he's going to take time to develop. It's one of the big differences I think you would see from a guy that's coming from Dayton and then a guy that's coming from Ohio State, right? You're going to be a little bit more pro ready coming from that Big Ten school and particularly coming in from a system that the New Orleans Saints love a ton. And even though Sean Payton's not there anymore with his big surprise retirement this offseason, the guy that's making the decisions in terms of the personnel when it comes to the draft is still very much Jeff Ireland. And so those prototypes, those connections that he has to other schools and programs and systems and schemes and all that are still very much going to be intact. So I don't expect the New Orleans Saints and Ohio State pipeline to go away at any point soon.
Who is another? There was 2 other Buckeyes that are there. Tyreke Smith, Haskell Garrett, both defensive linemen. Which one of the other 2 kind of popped off while on the field?
All right, I got to talk about Tyreke Smith here because you love the defensive ends at the Senior Bowl. You love watching these guys get in there and match up with some of the best tackles in the country. And that's exactly what happened with Tyreke Smith, who is lined up with Bernard Raymond, who is somebody that is getting a lot of attention. He's being considered a first-round offensive tackle, and Tyreke Smith kind of obliterated him. I mean, he ran right through him at one point. And I know that when it comes to Tyreke Smith, I usually think about him as a little bit more, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but in terms of my evaluation of him, I think he's a little bit more of a, I guess you could say, finesse guy, right? Like he uses his speed to get around the edge. He's really good at running the arc, things like that. But you didn't see him do a lot of physical stuff. Then all of a sudden, he goes up against Bernard Raymond and just puts everybody on notice immediately when he gets his opportunity out there. Or not immediately, but immediately when that play happened. So for me, even though Jeremy Ruckert had the more sustained success throughout the day, the guy that really flashed maybe the brightest at one point was Tyreke Smith. After that, or in addition to that, you saw him have his usual ups and downs, or not his usual up and downs, but the ups and downs that you would expect in this environment for a first day at practice. But I'll be really excited to see him tomorrow and the next day if he's going to be able to continue to push that level so far.
We're here with Ross Jackson from Locked On Saints. He is our eyes and ears down in Mobile, Alabama during the Senior Bowl practice. Could you take some time to talk about those ups and downs that you saw?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that there were a couple of times where you just saw him give up leverage a little bit. These situations, and this is something that you always see these coaches working on because it happens at just about every position, just coming up too much out of the stance, right? Giving up the center of gravity, giving up leverage instead of staying low and digging in. And so I think that that's a big piece of it. And then kind of the ups that you saw was that he was able to really take advantage of the lack of technique that he faced on the opposite side in some cases. So at one point he was going up against another offensive tackle, and the offensive tackle got his hands up too late. And so Tyreke Smith was able to take advantage of that because he's quick with his hands and he's very physical as a pass rusher. So I like what you saw from him in those instances, but you still had sort of those ups and downs that I referenced in terms of, every now and then he would come up a little bit too high or come up a little bit late himself and things like that. And so, just some timing stuff and everything and discipline type stuff, things that can easily be coached, which is the good news, right? If you can see it and it can be diagnosed, then that means that it can be treated, in this football landscape. So I think that in those situations, you get the opportunity to really be able to see something that is workable as opposed to something that's unsustainable.
Ross, you are a phenomenal cover. You do a phenomenal job covering the Saints and covering just the NFL in general. He came in, Tyreke Smith did, 6'3", 245. He was a hand in the ground, 3-point stance, defensive end at Ohio State. I know how the 3-4 is utilized in the NFL. I don't know all of the minute details about how defensive coordinators utilize that defense. But from what you know about NFL football, do you think that Tyreke Smith is more of a 3-point stance, 4-3 D end, or more of your outside linebacker, 3-4 type of defense, or D end linebacker type of guy there?
Yeah, well, look, I'll tell you, if he continues to run through offensive linemen the way that he did against Bernard Raymond, then just call him scheme versatile and put him wherever you want.
I like that. I like that.
No, I think that I would probably be interested in seeing him in those odd fronts. It would give him a little bit more of kind of a 5-tech to 6-tech type of run stopper role that would allow him to win with speed, but also be able to win with his hands and with physicality. So I'd probably give him sort of the opportunity to be more multiple in those situations and serve those multiple roles, because you can creep down that edge rusher over on the other side, make him a rush end as opposed to the big end, and all of a sudden he's doing something that feels familiar, right? Or you end up, having him in the situations where he's the big end and then he's worried about stopping the backside run or the front side play side run, right? So there's a lot of different ways that you might be able to work with him in that case. And so I think that would best suit him in that way.
There's one more guy there. I know interior defensive linemen don't really get the love that a Tyreke Smith might in a pass rush drill, or Jeremy Ruckert when he's catching passes or he's lining up as the Y, which is different from what was normal at Ohio State. But of course, you want to try to get a lot of the kinks, and you want to make guys a little bit uncomfortable day one, and they'll realize hey, this is a job interview and we're going to make you do things you probably didn't do in college. An interior D lineman, 6'1", I believe 298 was his official height and weight there at the Senior Bowl. Haskell Garrett. How does an interior defensive lineman make noise at a practice like this?
You have to be able to penetrate big time. You have to be able to penetrate. And if you can do that with, some nice pass rushing moves, I think back to Osa Odigizua last year, who had an incredible interior inside spin move that caught the eyes of every scout out there, caught the eyes of everybody out there. And now he's playing in the league, right? And so I think that when you look at those types of moments, that's what you're looking for in terms of being able to stand out as an interior defensive lineman. You're not going to stand out playing nose tackle. You're not going to stand out playing, 0-tech or 1-tech unless you have one of those big, breakthroughs in the line, and then you're able to get back and stop a run play in the backfield, which we did see a couple times in this in today's practices, but not necessarily from Haskell Garrett. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't notice Haskell Garrett too much. He didn't do that, right? He didn't stand out. He didn't jump off the field very well and throughout the practice. And so he's one that I'm really interested in seeing how he can help and progress himself moving forward throughout the rest of the practice week, because certainly you'd love to see him be able to join his other counterparts in terms of the attention that they're getting.
And that's interesting because fans love him. I understand there was a story going into the 2020 season. He got shot in his face.
Right.
The bullet went through both cheeks. He still played week one. I don't know how he's able to do that. He's not normal, not human. But we all know the story, but still there's things that happened this past season where it's the same thing you're talking about now, where he didn't really do things that would be a guy who's a captain, who's a leader, an All-American, former All-American. You expect this type of individual to pop off. Now, I said interior D lineman on purpose because this normally is not the practice, the type of environment for an interior defensive lineman to really wow people. You're
Right.
not getting all of the sexy looks. You're not getting
Yep.
all of the doing the things that are going to make people like yourself or other people from Locked On that are going to make their eyes pop out of their head
Hmm.
because of the play that you're doing on the field. It's just not that type of position. And I don't know if this is a great week for him going into it just because of his position. I don't know if him as a player, if he can really wow people like he needs to raise his draft stock. I saw Pro Football Focus. I don't know where the number. Yeah, they had him at number 122 overall
Hmm.
draft prospect. At first, I was like, that seems crazy. But then thinking about this past year, thinking about what you're talking about right now, that might be accurate, a great depiction about how Haskell Garrett needs this week to
Yeah.
really raise his draft stock.
Yeah, look, here's the way that I would say it too. If you can be inconsistent but have the highest of highs along with low lows, that's going to help you out. Then if you're inconsistent but having sort of middling highs and middling lows, right? If you're having those big sort of high variance type of evaluations based upon your inconsistencies, then there's an upside, there's a ceiling, there's something to build you towards in terms of trying to increase your level of consistency to play at that level, knowing there's going to be a little bit of a drop off once it becomes sustainable, right? But then you're at a higher peak than you would be if you're having these lower highs. And right now he's having the lower highs. So you just want to see a little bit of the athleticism that he has been able to show. He's had those flashes before,
Yeah.
and everything. There was the I can't remember exactly which game, but there was a game that he went off last year, and then the whole story around everything that he went through that got him there was like all over the place, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that one of those days, and particularly actually having one of those days, even if it's the third day, as long as he improves on the second practice and you can see that trajectory start to build, I think that would help him out a ton. And if he's somebody that's going to be able to take advantage of the combine or pro days or, private workouts and all that, depending upon how the NFL undergoes the offseason in that case, and I think all that can benefit, but it all starts here in Mobile.
It does. We're here with Ross Jackson from Locked On Saints. He's been our eyes and ears. It's only been one day down there in Mobile, Alabama for the senior bowl practice. Ross, I'm going to leave you with this a little bit longer, but this has been good stuff. I know Buckeye fans will love it. Among these three, who do you think has the best chance to raise their draft stock overall? Now, this is not just practice, also in the game. Who among these three athletes has the best chance to drastically raise their draft stock?
I'm going to consider positional value here a little bit and say Tyreke Smith.
Okay.
Because of the high value at his position, it gives him probably the highest opportunity in terms of what he might be able to raise his stock into that conversation, right? As a tight end, unfortunately, there's just not a ton that you're really going to be able to do to raise your stock if it's not already there, right? If you're coming in like a Dallas Goedert or a Mike Gesicki or one of these other like recent tight ends that walked in as potential first rounders, then sure, but you don't usually end up changing that type of perception of a tight end from a day two, late day two, early day three guy, which is where I think you'll see Jeremy Ruckert right now. He might be able to move himself into early day two, early round three, late round two, throughout this process. But when you have the positional value as an edge rusher, which would be either the second or third most important player or position on a team, depending upon who you talk to, behind the quarterback and potentially the guy that protects that quarterback's blind side, right? Whether that be left tackle or right tackle for that particular franchise, it just gives you the opportunity to be able to elevate a little bit higher because of the way that people value your position. So I'd go with Tyreke Smith in that one.
Last question. You've been doing the NFL thing for a while. I'm hesitant, very hesitant at him weighing in at 245.
Mm-hmm.
Is that 245 going to hinder an NFL team from drafting him on day two?
So there's two pieces to it. And the first one is that it depends upon the system that really falls in love with him and what they teach him to do, right? It's still on the coaches to teach him. So if they see the natural tools and they say, hey, we actually want to move you over to linebacker and let you rush from a 2-point stance or something like that, and they could take advantage of a little bit of that athleticism that he has and be able to help to increase all that, then that's great. Otherwise, it depends on how that particular franchise feels about his frame. Because if they feel like they can get him up to 260, potentially even up to 270, then all of a sudden he fits in naturally in something that's very familiar to him in terms of what he was doing at Ohio State. Just for an example, the New Orleans Saints did this. They did it with Marcus Davenport. Marcus Davenport came in out of UTSA, about 6'5", 6'6", and he was in the 260 range when they 260 range when they drafted him, and then by the time that he got into his second season, he was in the 280s, and then they're using him as a 5-tech. So the teams will manufacture based upon what it is that the player has to offer. And so if they have the frame, then the frame, they'll make it work. If they have the scheme that can support him at his current size, then they'll be okay. It's just that he has to be able to show that athleticism. He has to be able to show that smaller frame is of value to him. And if he's going to be running over 300-pound offensive linemen, then if he has the frame to get bulky, they'll probably want to bulk him up.
Ross, this has been fun, man. It's been a while since we have been able to chop it up here on the podcast. Let the people know where they can follow you on Twitter in case they want to follow you along all week while you're down there at Senior Bowl practice.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We'll have a lot of good stuff coming up over here, but you can always check it all out over at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter. And, of course, with that Locked On Saints podcast, I know we have some Ohio State, New Orleans Saints overlay. You know what I'm saying? So y'all can always come through over at the Locked On Saints podcast as well.
And guys, you can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. Ohio State has a big basketball game coming up on Thursday against Iowa. Ross is down at the Senior Bowl. I'll be watching on the NFL Network. The game is on Saturday. Basketball's on Thursday. There's a lot going on Ohio State-wise. I'm excited. You can tell by the voice. But just stay locked in right here every single day, Monday through Friday, to make sure you're staying up to date with the Ohio State Buckeye football and basketball team. And, oh, yeah, after this show, check out Locked On Saints. Ross has good stuff going on there as well.